All right, now we can do the official welcome to QuickBooks Online. This training is hosted by Grow South Dakota in partnership with the Small Business Administration. Our trainer today is Kelly Weaver, the Regional Director of the Small Business Development Center in Grow South Dakota. So Kelly, I think you can take it away.
All right. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks everybody for being here today. This is our first QuickBooks Online class of the year, and we'll be offering this again probably in May and August. So if you have others you'd like to recommend, please do send them our way. So a little bit about what the Small Business Development Center is. We are a free service. It's a national program, so every state has an SBDC, and we are here to help people with getting their business started, expanding their business, better understanding about business through trainings that we offer. And our Small Business Development Center here is based in Aberdeen, and we cover the northeast corner of the state, but our trainings are open to all folks. We get people from across South Dakota and even beyond. But as far as local one-on-one assistance with your business, you probably want to connect with your local SBDC, and you can find those centers in South Dakota at our SBDC website, sdbusinesshelp.com. Or if you're outside of South Dakota, you can go to the sba.gov website and look under local assistance. We have 6 centers, actually 7 centers here in South Dakota. So generally, anybody's within an hour or two. In today's virtual world, you can be talking to a counselor virtually as well and save the travel, especially when it's kind of a day like today when it's a little snowy and not so fun to be on the roads. So that's a little bit about the SBDC. Our Aberdeen office here is hosted by Grow South Dakota. So we do a lot of things in partnership with Grow. They help underwrite some of our SBDC training. They offer some of their own business training and technical assistance programs and business lending. So, when you get communications from the SBDC or from Grow, we're always cross-promoting what things are going on in both organizations, or both parts of the organization. We're all one organization, but work in different areas. So with that, just the goal of the course today is to give you a little tour of QuickBooks Online, help you understand the features and functions of it, how to get around. So I'll be working with a sample company, so we'll be able to move around within the software. If you have a QuickBooks Online account, you could try to follow along that, but I would just recommend just kind of watching this because everybody's account is set up a little bit different, and you might get lost trying to figure out where I'm at relative to where that is in your software. So I would just kind of watch and learn, I guess, if that be the case. With that, I am going to launch a poll here just to give me some idea of who is in the class today. And if you could, hopefully everybody can see that and go ahead and answer those 3 questions. And we'll go from there. Also, while you're doing that, I'm going to post some resources in the chat. So the resources I'm posting is going to be a pricing list from Intuit on their different QuickBooks Online versions and what they are priced at and how they compare as far as features. They generally have an ongoing discount that they promote on their website, so I'd always check there first. The second link I'm going to post is to another option for some discounts if you're creating a new QuickBooks Online account. If you're new to QuickBooks totally, or you're transferring from a desktop to an online account, sbdcfinancialtools.org has some discounts. Typically, they're a little bit better than the QuickBooks discounts, but it just kind of depends on what QuickBooks is offering at the time. I also have a couple training resources listed there. One is QuickBooks official YouTube channel. They have a lot of great short format videos on specific topics. So this is kind of the big picture view. If you get into, gee, how do I do a statement, there's probably a video specifically about that at this YouTube channel. And then the last resource is Firm of the Future. It's more accountant focused, and it's kind of there for accounting firms, but they do put out a lot of good content about new features of QuickBooks or changes that are coming up. So I always like to refer to that when I'm wondering what's going on, and new and upcoming. So now that I've talked about those, I could actually send them so you could see them. So I'm going to end the poll here. And let's see if we can share the results and see the results. So most of the folks on the call today have little experience with QuickBooks. So I'm assuming they're either not using it or they're mainly using the online version. We have a few that are on our desktop version yet. The desktop version has sunsetted. They do not sell new versions of QuickBooks Desktop unless you're using the enterprise version, which is their high-end version. So for those of you that are using a desktop, you're going to see we're using the online training today, of the online platform for the training today. So you're going to see it looks a lot different, but the back end and how accounting works is how accounting works. So you'll be able to kind of follow along with that piece of it as well. And then some other accounting systems people have seen here. I'm not going to be able to access that right now. So with that, we are going to go on to training. Let's see here. So I am going to start off with sharing my screen here. Okay. I want to go here. Okay, you should all be able to see the QuickBooks Online page at this point. So if anybody cannot, please speak up or put it in the chat, but I think you should be good to go. So one thing I will mention, a couple things, I guess, at this point. The good thing about the online version is you always have the most up-to-date. You don't ever have to buy a new version. You're always getting new updates. That's also the bad thing sometimes because you're going along, you know how to get around in the software, and pretty soon you turn it on. It's like, oh, this looks different, which has been my experience the last couple times I've logged into either a QuickBooks account that I use or this training platform. It's like, oh, this looks a little bit different. So if I stumble around on the menus, that's probably the why, because I'm still getting used to this new platform as well. I do want to share, there is a function for those of you that are desktop users or have been desktop users. QuickBooks Online has a desktop app. And I use this for a QuickBooks account that I do some bookkeeping for our Big Idea competition. And this is what it looks like. So it makes the desktop and the navigation look a lot like desktop. So if that is, part of your concern about switching to the online version is you're not sure how to get around, there is this point where you can toggle on and off. So if I take it off, now it looks like what we just look like if it lets me do it here. It takes you back to a non-desktop, and looks the same as my training platform. But if I turn on desktop view, then it goes back to something that's more akin to what QuickBooks Desktop looks. Plus, it's got this menu at the top, which is what QuickBooks Desktop is, and it allows you to open multiple companies at once. So just be aware that there is that interface if that is helpful. All right, let's go back here. So And to access that interface, it's just under the settings, get the desktop app. So it's really easy to add. So first of all, let's take a little bit of a tour of what we're looking at here on the screen. This is a sample company, so one thing we don't see when we go through this training is some of the questions you get asked when you first start your QuickBooks training, or your QuickBooks account. When you start that subscription, you're going to get asked a few questions about your company, about the legal structure, about, how you buy and sell goods. And the reason it's asking those questions is it's customizing some of the preferences and showing you things that are relative to your company. You're setting up QuickBooks so it functions what you need for your company. It's kind of a very initial setting of the preferences. There's still a lot of preferences you can set on your own, or you can change those preferences. For instance, if you start out and you say, I'm only a service company, I don't sell products, I don't have inventory. And maybe down the road, you add a product line to your service business. So you might have to turn some of those features on. So if you're not seeing something that you think you should be, it might be because the preferences are set such that it's hidden. It's not that the functionality isn't there for you, it's just hidden. The other point I would make is currently QuickBooks Online has 4 different versions, from the very basic Simple Start up to the QuickBooks Advanced. Just know that it's easy to move between those companies. So I always encourage people, if they're not really sure which version to get, and they're kind of hedging between this version or that version, I would start with the lower version. And if you find that there's a feature that's only available by going up to the next version, then you just need to upgrade your subscription, and that feature will become available. All your data will stay there, everything will come along. Likewise, if you find that there's a lot of features you're using or you're not using, but you're paying for, you can also downgrade your subscription. So just keep that in mind. That's one thing nice about QuickBooks is it can grow with you. If you're just starting out, maybe all you need is Simple Start. You don't have employees. You're not, it's very simple, basic business. You don't have to track a lot of inventory. And then you can always add more features as you go along. So, the other thing that I will note with the starting of a QuickBooks subscription is one of the first things they're going to prompt you to do is to add your bank account. And basically what that's doing is connecting your QuickBooks Online account to your bank account so that as checks clear your bank account, your bank is pushing that information into QuickBooks for you to do something with. And that allows you to use that data coming from the bank as the basis for entering transactions, as opposed to entering everything in by hand. That is totally up to you. I said it's front and center. That's what they really push you to do, because they think that's helpful, and that's how you can be more efficient in your accounting work. But if you're not comfortable with that for whatever reason, or you just don't want to start that, you want to do it manually for a while and get your feet wet with it, you don't have to make that connection. That just means that every transaction you enter, you'll have to enter from scratch within the software, which is totally acceptable. Every QuickBooks Online account has a free user where you can invite your accountant to access your QuickBooks account. The very basic QuickBooks account, Simple Start, your subscription allows you 1 user and plus the free accountant user. So even though it says 1 user, the free accountant user is included. I think the next level up, you have 3 users. And what do users mean? That just means multiple people can access your QuickBooks Online account and work in that account at the same time. So, if the way QuickBooks Online is accessed is through a web browser. So anyone who logs in, they can log in under their own username and password, and they can be putting information into the company accounting system the same time that you are. So just that's kind of what that function of the user is. Also note that one major difference between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop is the number of companies you can use or can have open. So in the desktop version, you can have multiple companies and use that desktop platform. In the online version, you have to have a subscription for every company. I wish they were a little bit more open to letting you have maybe one or two, because we have a lot of small businesses that also have like a separate LLC for their real estate. Or maybe they have a couple small businesses that they're doing, but the way QuickBooks is set up, you have to have a subscription for every company. Also note that QuickBooks, QuickBooks is the framework for your accounting information. But there are apps, and they're listed here on the side. All kinds of different apps. Oh, I want that. So let me see that. Listed here, and all different types of categories. And then within that category, there's a breakdown. So if I wanted an app for inventory or to add purchase orders, I mean, if I just go to, let's try this again. Inventory, click. Oh, these are actually, can't see on my screen here. This must be all apps that are active in this company. Anyway, I guess my point is this. You can add apps. Most of them come with an additional cost to enhance what the basic version of QuickBooks is doing for you. And a lot of times those come in more detailed accounting functions like inventory. Sometimes it comes in things like payroll. It would be a separate app that is added into every QuickBooks Online platform. None of the online platforms have payroll specifically as part of it. It's an additional app you have to add. Some of them come into terms of staffing or time tracking or marketing to customers. QuickBooks itself can do a lot, but sometimes, depending on your needs of your company, there are limitations. So you may look to the apps for that. I'm just wondering if where the best way to find those are. So I think under the app section is where you can go look for that, or go to quickbooks.com/apps. And I like to point people to apps that are being presented within the software or by QuickBooks, because we know that those have been vetted by QuickBooks, and we know that they work with QuickBooks. Other softwares that you might have, that you might deal with, you maybe already have a separate software that says, hey, we integrate with QuickBooks. How well do they integrate with QuickBooks would be the question. And do you really want them to integrate with QuickBooks? Point of sale systems and things like that nature. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother training session. But just know that there are other, besides just going up in the subscription levels, there might be also apps that could help get you additional functionality. If you have an existing company with financial transactions, you're using either QuickBooks Desktop or some other accounting platform, when you open your new subscription, check into the functionality of importing the existing data you have, how you're able to do that, and maybe bring that data over to QuickBooks. So structure, how do you kind of get around in QuickBooks? And this is where there's so many ways to get around. Sometimes it's confusing. It's flexible. So eventually you'll find your way about how you want to get around in QuickBooks. The home button always takes you here with the different functionalities at the top and also a dashboard. And this dashboard is customizable. So if there's certain things, every time you open on QuickBooks, you kind of want to get a big picture view of what's going on with your company, you can create this and edit this dashboard. This one actually has 2 pages of things that are on the dashboard. So that's something that you can edit and create and customize up here at this customize button. Along the side is our different menu items. And this is the part that's really changed. I can, yeah, get that out of there. So the couple things I would point to is the plus icon is always where you're going to be able to find all the different transactions that you can do. So if you want to enter a transaction and you're not sure where I need to go under here to find it, you can go to create and it breaks it down. And under each of those categories, you can see the different transactions that you can do. So plus is always creating new categories. Your home gets you to your home page. You can bookmark things here and create your own bookmark. So if you are always going to the create invoice page, you can bookmark that. So you can easily find that and not have to search through a lot of menus to do that. So feel free to customize that way as well. QuickBooks has a couple different views. They have a business view and an accounting view. The accounting view is kind of more accounting-centric wording and descriptions, where the business view is a little bit more plain language. So if that's helpful, you can change your views. And the way to do that is to go to the gear icon, which is where all your settings. So plus is to do work and to create transactions. Gear icon is settings to change how QuickBooks works and to put into place some of those preferences that you want to look at. So before we look at the gear icon, I do want to, I think, all right. Depending on what version you have, this sidebar can bump out and be hidden. It's kind of collapsed now. It might be able to be expanded once we get into actually entering transactions. So we'll look at that if I remember. So under the gear icon, these are things that are specific to your company, you know, how you use some other tools, your subscription, and then the lists that you have easy access to. So remember when I said, well, and here's at the bottom where you can switch from accountant view to business view. And I'm just going to switch to business view. I don't know if you'll be able to tell any particular difference, but that's the. It doesn't look too different at this point. So let's go back to the gear icon. So I mentioned when you start up a new company that you get asked some questions, and what that's doing is kind of setting up some of these settings for your company. So I would encourage you to look through all of these, particularly these items here, because they're ways that you can customize QuickBooks for your use. Get rid of stuff you don't use, kind of simplify how things look, how you interact with the software. And that might just take a little bit of playing around with and getting used to. Eventually you know how you like to get around, and you'll be able to customize it more easily once you know how you like to work in the software. But just to give you an example, under account and settings, for instance, we have all these different categories, which you can change your settings. Obviously, your company information, that's something that probably gets set up right away, but maybe you skipped over some of the information and now you're going to create an invoice and the invoice doesn't have your address on it. Well, that's because QuickBooks doesn't have an address to put on your invoice. So eventually, you might do kind of a quick startup to get going, but you might find out later you have to go back and update some things, or your company changes. You've added an LLC now instead of you've changed your form of ownership or whatever it might be. Usage gives you some data on where you're at in terms of the software that you have. This current plan is QuickBooks Online Plus, which is the third version up. And so there's account limits and user limits and things of that nature. So if you want to check where you're at on that, into actual using of the software under the sales section. And we're going to see this a little bit throughout because this is a test and a training test company, a sample company. So there's certain things they'll give this little warning about, and sometimes I get that even when I'm using my regular QuickBooks software. It's kind of like, okay, you needed a little time to process, so just refresh and try again. And usually it works. But here's where you can, some of the types of questions you might have gotten asked to begin with. Do you have invoice terms? Do you want these fields on your sales form? You want a shipping form? You want a service date? So you can turn these on and off. And then if you want to come in and edit it, you just click on that little edit pencil there, and you can change any of those things. So as you're now going to create an invoice, you might say, hey, I want, this field or that field, or I don't want that field that's showing up. I can come in here and change that. Customer financing is like a fee for service that QuickBooks offers. So there's also some of that built in here that you can take advantage of QuickBooks credit card processing or customer financing programs for a fee. Those are available. Products and services, late fees, progress invoices, messages that you want to put on your invoices. Do you want to show statements, aging statements, just all kinds of different things. So until you kind of go through and look through this, you don't really know what applies or doesn't apply. So just encourage you to look through that. So under the sales, it's more about customizing your sales forms, your payment terms, and things of that nature. If we look under the advanced tab, a couple of things you'll see there is what your accounting method is. Accrual is the default, but if you're using a cash-based accounting method, you can change that. What you call your customers, if you don't want to call them customers. If you were in a nonprofit, people might change that to donors or supporters or sponsors or something like that. But customers, I think, is a pretty good generic term. What your accounting fiscal year is, different things regarding your chart of accounts. Do you want to use account numbers or not? Are you going to track classes or locations, which those are probably functions that are only available in the higher versions of QuickBooks. So again, you might not see all of this stuff, but you can see that this type of thing on the advanced side is a little bit more accounting centric about how you're going to, what QuickBooks is going to track for you outside of the normal income and expenses. So just be aware that this settings function allows you to edit those preferences about how you interact with QuickBooks. Oh, I should have probably gotten all the way out of there. Then under manage users, this is where you would add your accounting firm, your free accountant. And then usually there's a way to invite somebody and send them an email so they get invited. And then once they're invited, they'll show up here, or it'll show that they've been invited. And then these are the other users that you have assigned to this account. And as I mentioned, the number of users is determined by the subscription level. Go back. So it's easier. You can customize your form styles if you want to, like, so here is a standard form for an invoice. You can add your logo, you can add some color, you can change the content. Some of this is changed. What shows on here is changed by those settings we looked at. This is more design related. Here's content related, and emails. If you want to send a form, send your invoice via email, how do you want it to show up in the emails? So there's a way there to customize. Also, I would say for the most part, when you're in QuickBooks, you're probably not going to use the back button very often. Usually when you're in a form, there'll be a box that you can close out of, or for here, it's just easier to go back instead of going, using my browser back button. It's easier to move around within the software. The lists here, chart of accounts, is one you can get here, and you can again get these access through these by different ways within the software. But if you're wondering, that's where you can find that. Now you'll notice there is not a list for customers or vendors or employees. Those are found within the customer dashboard rather than a separate list. One thing I will mention about those things, products and services and customers and vendors, is just think about your naming convention. Especially when you're starting fresh, when you think about a customer, do you want that customer list to be first name, last name, or last name, comma, first name? Be consistent, because it's a lot easier to find things that way. And also you won't end up with one person who is in your accounting system as two customers. If I'm not consistent, I could have a John Doe customer and I could have a Doe, comma, John customer. QuickBooks is going to treat that as two separate people and two separate invoices and statements and activities and reports. While they're really one person and one customer. So you want to make sure that you're consistent with your naming so that you can access the data in a way that's helpful to you. Going back to our gear icon one last time, here, the different tools, importing data from desktop, exporting data. Sometimes you want to create a special report that you just can't get customized enough in QuickBooks. You could export that report to Excel, for instance, to create your own report. Or you can export your accounting data to another system if you need to for some reason. Budgeting is a feature that I don't think is involved in every level of QuickBooks subscription. But if you need that is a function that's available so that you can see reports actual compared to budget. Reconcile your banking account. You can also access that through the main dashboard. And then at the top here, and then again, your subscriptions and billings. So if you want to upgrade or downgrade your subscriptions, you're going to want to check on that. If you need to, if your credit card expired and you need to update your payment information, you would find that here. So that gives you a little bit of insight into what's in that settings area. And then lastly, but there's not so much a help button like there used to be. I mean, there is this one, and it's generally going to be relative to where you're at in the software, the information, and then you can always type information in here or search for something, a keyword or questions on topics. In this search button up here, you can search more for transaction data. So that's very helpful if you're looking for, you don't have to go to a specific customer's record to get information. You just type in the customer's name and it'll bring up information for you. So just kind of keep in mind the differences between those. This is more searching your transactional data, and this is more of a search on tutorial helpful tips and information. If you got notifications, that's the little item there. This is your profile button there. This button is new, and this is some of the AI features that they're starting to put into QuickBooks. I have not navigated into this at all. But just know that is an AI feature, so be careful how you use it. I assume it's contained within QuickBooks. It's not going into some larger public large language model, but I would want to do a little research on it. And they are adding some agent type functions within QuickBooks that will prompt, hey, you've got 3 overdue invoices. Do you want me to craft a letter or an email to send to them to remind them, and you can prompt it. It'll prompt you, and you can take advantage of that to do some of those tasks for you, or at least give you a draft to work with. So I think that's, they're finding more and more ways to simplify and streamline the simple tasks within your accounting system. But I guess I would err on the caution of know how your accounting system works before you rely on an AI agent or anything else to do it for you. Even the bank feeds. Know what's happening when you use that function so that you understand where things are going. If you just say, oh yeah, that looks like that's the right thing, let's do that, and then you don't really know what's happening or behind the scenes and what it's doing with the data, then it's just confusion instead of helpful. So I'm always a fan of taking it baby steps, and if you need to do things manually for a while to understand how things are going, that's totally acceptable. So that is a little bit about this, and I'm guessing this is the live accountant. They do have a live accountant function where you can access a live person for questions. You can actually have a feed where they are actually helping you with your books. So there are some additional services available too. So let's look at our chart of accounts, because that is really the backbone of your accounting system. And let's see if I can this a little bit there. So when I mentioned before, the side menu here, it can collapse. So we have more real estate on your screen. And then if you want to see it again, you can just click on that. So just understanding the chart of accounts here, based on the information you give to QuickBooks when you first set up your company, what type of company it is, what industry you're in, it will create a chart of accounts for you. So if you're a new company, that's probably great. If you're an existing company with your own chart of accounts, that's probably something you can upload and import into QuickBooks. Or you can have it create you a chart of accounts and then edit it so it kind of matches what you've been using. So the accounts that are provided for you are listed in order by first the balance sheet accounts, which are assets like checking, accounts receivable, inventory, fixed assets like vehicles, equipment. And then we move into the liabilities section of the balance sheet. Now we have accounts payable, credit card liabilities, taxes payable, loans payable, all those things that your company owes other people. And then we have the balance sheet part. And this is a new feature right here. I'm just now noticing these green buttons say BAL for balance sheet. P&L, the blue buttons, everything after that is on the profit and loss statement. That's kind of a nice helpful tip there for people, especially for people that don't know where they're going to find a liability account on which statement. Now they know that's on the balance sheet. So you have assets, liabilities, and equity on the balance sheet. And then the profit and loss statement, you have your income accounts and your expense accounts. So these have all been created. If this was an account that was set up for you, you might want to go through then and say, hey, I don't need that account. I'm not going to use that account, or I want to change the name of that account to better reflect how I would use it. You could do that. And so how do we edit these accounts? I think we just have to check on it. Well, actually, that is going to give you the register. Under this action button, this view register, when I double clicked on it, that's where it took me. The register just shows you all the transactions in that account. If you want to edit the account, then you click on the drop down arrow. So let's just find one of these that I might too. So for instance, sales of product income. That seems like kind of a clunky name to me. I'd rather have it say product sales. So I can just edit the name, save it. And see if it's changed. Product sales. So within each of these product types, like all the income accounts are organized by alphabetical. And if you had account numbers, they would be organized by account numbers. And then you get into the expense account, and those are organized alphabetically. So they're still grouped together by types of accounts, but alphabetically within. These accounts that are indented are what we call sub accounts. So let's go up here. So under landscaping, we have job materials as a sub account, and we have labor as a sub account. And under those, we have additional sub accounts under job materials and additional sub accounts under labor. And what that does, it allows you to get down to some more detail on your financial statements. So on a financial statement, if we had a collapsed view, landscaping services would be one line and would consist of everything underneath of it. Or we could show landscaping and job materials and labor, with job materials including all the activity in its sub-accounts and labor including all the activity in its sub-accounts. Or we can show all and have subtotals that total up to total landscaping. So that it's just a way to break down more detail. It's helpful if you need it. If you don't really need it or aren't going to use it, it does add length to your profit and loss statements, which sometimes can just add confusion. The longer, you don't want a 4-page profit and loss statement. You want something that's manageable that you can view and see and, assess. But if you need it and you're going to use it, that it's there for that purpose. And you can have a sub account of any type of account can have a sub account. The sub account has to be the same type. Like these, you can't have a current asset account that's a sub account of a fixed asset account. You have to have them all of the same type. But that is why that presents differently. And when you run a financial report, you'll see that differently. Let's just look at. So when you look at an account in the chart of accounts, you'll see some critical fields. So anything that has an asterisk has to have information in it. So you have to have an account name, you have to have an account type, And this detail type is just another categorization. I haven't really found a good use for that at this point. I don't work in it enough to know, but it's got some standard options there. And then if you want it to be a sub account, you click this button and then you have to fill out, well, what is this a sub account of? And so you'll pick landscaping services and job materials. So this is a sub account of job materials, which is a sub account of landscaping services. And when you see the account with that colon in it, that signifies that it's a sub account. So if you were to look at this account name in a transaction, it would say landscaping services, job materials, decks and patios, if it was in a transaction. So that's how you put that in there. You can have a description in here that's optional. It shows you how it's going to show up in your chart of accounts. So that's interesting. But there's really not a lot of information you need. If you had selected in your settings to use account numbers, there would also be a field there for account numbers. But since that setting is turned off, it doesn't show up. So if you're looking for it, that's where you would have to go back and turn that setting on. In the online world, you'll see that one of these other options here, I'll pick a different account here. Go down here. So let's just say I had fuel as a sub account of automobile, but I decided I really don't need that because if I look at my automobile account, I can see there's one place where I buy fuel. I have an account there, so I pay it monthly. So if I wanted to really know what I spent on fuel, I could just look at that vendor and find out. So I really don't need this sub account. So I want to get rid of it. I want to delete it, would be how people would say it. Well, you can see it doesn't allow you to delete it. Number one, you can't delete something where there's actual activity in it already, because if you run a report for a previous period when you did use it, you need that data available. And in the online world, you don't really delete accounts either. So your option is to make it inactive. And what happens when it makes it inactive is that it just disappears from this list. Data attached to it still exists. If you're running reports for that period, it's still going to show up, but it just takes it off the active list so that when you're choosing, looking through your chart of accounts, you're not having to scroll through a bunch of accounts you're not using, or when you're choosing through a drop-down list in a transaction, you're not having to, fumble through a bunch of accounts you're not using. So making it inactive just makes it disappear from your active drop-down lists and your active chart of accounts lists. So if we do that, and it also says it reduces usage. So when we looked at that usage report, you had 44 of 250 accounts you were using. Now it would be 43 once we made this inactive. So this completes all transactions associated with the accounts. And we want to say, yep, make it inactive. So we can't use it anymore. And now when we go back and look at automobile, it's not there anymore. And I believe if we wanted to make something active again, if we went to, let's see if we can test this out. If we look for, well, I might be speaking out of turn. You should be able to reactivate that account if you want to use it down the road. I'm just not exactly sure how to tell you how to do that at this point, but probably not critical also. Someone's got there. Next then, I think that gives you a pretty good idea of your chart of accounts, how you can move around in it, how it's organized, how you can edit those. You can always add new accounts. Let's see, right up here under the new account button, you can you couldn't, or import new accounts. So pretty easy to move around in that. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is our bank feeds. And this is not where I'm going. Go to our dashboard. That's probably where we're gonna get. So here are the bank accounts that are tied to this company. And if I want to go to my checking account, I'm going to get to this bank transactions window. And trying to think. I'm not sure what that new banking page is about. So we're just gonna get rid of it. Okay, this is where I wanted to go. So here is my checking account. It says I have 25 transactions for review, which is also on this tab. It shows what my checking account balance is with my bank. That's this number here as of this date. And I want to pay attention to these three categories. So all the 25 transactions are listed down here. These are information that's been pushed over from the bank. These are transactions that have cleared your bank, and now the bank's pushed this information into your QuickBooks for you to do something with. The for review accounts are not in your accounting books. They're just sitting out here on this page waiting for you to tell it to do something with them. It's suggesting what you should do to them or how you should categorize them. But if you were to go into your checking account in QuickBooks or to go in and look at an expense account, I'm trying to find, like if this was to clean my car and I categorize that in my automobile expense, if you were to go look for this transaction in your automobile expense in your chart of accounts, it wouldn't be there because it's in this for review window. So it's in limbo. It's waiting for you to do something. So again, it's helpful. It's coming from the bank. And now this transaction has data associated with it that you don't have to hand enter in. And I'm just going to pick a couple. And you'll see there's different actions prompted here. You need to assign a category. Everything needs to have a category. The amounts and the dates and the descriptions are coming from the bank. You can edit those as well. So where it says review, it's like, okay, something needs to be taken care of. You need to assign a category here. Where it says match, it's found another transaction already in your chart of accounts that matches this. So this is a deposit for $868. So perhaps in QuickBooks, you've recorded that you've received a payment from a customer. You invoiced that customer. The customer sent you money. So you told QuickBooks, okay, I'm going to receive a payment against this invoice. And now that payment is sitting out there to be put into your checking account. And this is how it found it. It's kind of sitting out there in that undeposited funds account and it's matching it up. So if it matches and you know that that's the right match, you can just click match and it enters it right in because it already knows what account, it's already found something in QuickBooks that it's attached to. And so whatever you already put in QuickBooks, probably, you've already selected what account it should go to. In a case where there's a couple matches for a similar expense, it's flagging those, but it's not going to allow you to match because you're going to have to choose. And where it does not find any kind of a match, that's where you're going to get this review category. And you can batch these things. So if you wanted to batch all your things that matched, you could, click all of them and then just take care of them that way with one button, but you're still having to click them all. So I'm not sure that's a big savings, but let's take a look at one of these expenses here that needs to be reviewed that doesn't have anything attached to it. So here's a check. Well, we don't really know what it is from the bank, but let's do review. Let's see if that gets me. So when we click review, we get this more detailed. So we need to categorize it. We need to give it an expense. And if it's an expense for more than one expense category, we can split the transaction. So maybe part of it was for a customer job and you want to put in job materials, and maybe part of it was for a repair item for your business that you would want to put in maintenance, for instance. It's only $24.38. So let's just say that this was a maintenance item that you went and bought light bulbs or something. So we wanted to put that in building repairs. Or building maintenance. If you're selling a product or service, you could choose that, but this is actually a vendor that you're paying, so it's not really a sale. Or if you're buying a product from a vendor wholesale and you want to associate that with a specific product in your inventory, you could do that. So basically, you need a category. That's the only item that is asterisk here. You need the vendor who was paid for. You need a category. I would also say you need a memo. So memos are great because they show up in report. And, 6 months from now, are you going to remember what you paid $24.38 for at Hicks Hardware? Probably not. And do you really want to dig out that receipt and find out? No. So use your memo to categorize that or to identify that. And then you can just confirm. You have other options here. This is the detail that came up from the bank. So it doesn't really say whether it was a debit or a credit or like a debit card or a check. Generally, if there's a check, the check number would be attached to that. But it doesn't appear so in this case. And a lot of times what comes over to the bank is like if you use a debit card, it'll say POS, it'll have a number transaction, the date all buried into this big long thing. You don't really want that here up in your vendor name. So that's where you can create a rule that says everything that comes through that says Hicks Hardware, even though if it has a bunch of other stuff behind it, we want that to go to vendor Hicks Hardware. So you don't have to re-edit that every time. You can also add attachments. So let's say you have a receipt that you want to copy that receipt and attach it to this transaction. You can do that too. So if we do confirm, now if we go back to the top, we'll see we only have 24 items left for review. And if we go over to the categorize tab, we're going to see that this is now categorized. And we can still edit it from here if we want to. But hopefully you've done the due diligence and you don't have to do it twice. Excluded, the only time you would really use this, I think, is if some people have a very small business where they're using one checking account for their personal business and their business, but they're still using QuickBooks. So they might exclude any expenses that are personal expenses. They don't want to categorize them into any of their business profit and loss numbers. So that's about the only time I can think of that you would use that excluded button. For the most part, you're going to review every transaction and categorize it. If we look at this one that has 2 matches, it'll just say, okay, which one was this? These are 2 items that were already entered into QuickBooks, one as a bill payment and one as just a strict expense. So, looking at this name here that it's got Pam's name on it, I'm going to guess it was this one, which is what QuickBooks is also guessing. So if it's not any of these, you can look for other matches, but more than likely that's the one. So you just click match. You don't really have an opportunity to edit or add any additional description to that. Unless you categorize, then you can do that. But you really don't want to, there's already categorization attached to this expense. So it should already be categorized to an expense account through this transaction. And now if I want to double check, I can click on that anytime anything's highlighted that, I can go back and say, yep, it's already categorized to legal and professional. So we're going to save and close that. Get rid of this. We're going to come back to here. List. Go back to here. We're just going to say, yep, that's the one, match. And now that one is taken care of. And when we go back to the top list, we only have 23. So you can see once you understand how these work, in a very short order, I could take care of these remaining 23 because half of them or more are just matches. So as long as those matches make sense, I can just click that button and those are all taken care of. And then I only have to worry about these that I actually have to assign an account to. So that's the benefit of the bank feed, is that it brings that information in from the bank and allows you to quickly dissect and review those and get them categorized where they need to be. Okay. With that, I think I have kind of come to the spot where we'll take a quick break, but I think we might have a few questions here in the chat. So let's see if I can click on that to see if there's anything we need to address there. One, Carmen says we use a credit union and have a savings checking and a PAC. The PAC is not updated. I'm not sure what a PAC is. Is there something that doesn't allow a PAC? Not sure I can answer that question. Oh, political action account. Okay. That's what I thought a PAC is. I just wouldn't thought that would be related to a business. So yeah. I don't know that there's anything. It might have to do more with the type of account it is at the bank and whether the bank allows that. So you might have to go back to your credit union and ask them that question. If you haven't tried to link the account, yeah, you should link the account. That's because QuickBooks needs you to make that happen. It doesn't happen automatically always. It's worth a try at least. Is customized feature in a higher version than simple? The customization is available at all levels of QuickBooks. It's just a matter of how much customization is available, I think. So yes. Anybody else have any other questions they want to put in the chat, or if you want to turn on your mic and have questions, I'm happy to answer those. Okay. I am back. I have to see there's a couple more questions. Carmen, if you're still on, as far as the nonprofit making a difference in the QuickBooks features, not really. It's just that sometimes the features are more, it's just like how you think about a nonprofit. There's still a business model there. There's still income and expenses. It's just sometimes you call it different things. And I don't think the fact that the accounting firm owns your subscription really makes a difference in your functionality, other than what and again, what level of subscription you have. Accounting firms, a lot of times QuickBooks has a relationship with accounting firms where they can give the accounting firm that subscription at a lower price and then just have it billed to the customer through the accounting firm rather than directly to the customer, but I don't think it affects your functionality at all. And then your question about Square and Zephy. I think they just basically they come in as a deposit into your account. If you're just using a bank feed, I don't know if you're integrating Square and Zephy into your accounting directly, because they would have a way to integrate those. But if you're strictly just, you know, that money's going into your bank account and then the information is coming over on the bank feed, then they're handled like any other payment. And that gets me to the question from Meisters, because it's the same kind of question. And we're going to get to this question as we go through this next class. But essentially, big picture view is how QuickBooks handles payments. When you create an invoice or a sales receipt in QuickBooks, when you receive a sales receipt, that means you got paid. When you create an invoice, that means you haven't been paid yet. So when you do a sales receipt, it puts that payment that you received into an account called undeposited funds, which then has to be put into the bank account as a deposit. Likewise, with an invoice, you record the sale when you record the invoice, but you don't record a payment because you haven't been paid. That's why you're invoicing them. So you affect the accounts receivable account. And then when you get the payment physically from the customer in the mail, you go into QuickBooks and you apply that payment to that invoice. And again, then that payment amount is moved to the undeposited funds account. You can think about this in terms of, hey, that's the cash register, or that's the bank bag that, you know, that check's sitting in on your, you know, on your desk. It hasn't actually physically gone to the bank yet. In QuickBooks world, it hasn't been moved out of that account into the bank account. And I will walk through this on the screen, but just kind of a big picture. There's a process of where you're telling QuickBooks where this money is at. And then there's the process in the real world. So we'll walk through that in just a short here. So one thing that you can also do with QuickBooks and with any browser window actually is you can duplicate your window, which I like to do sometimes when I'm working on transactions, because then I have the window where I'm actually doing work, but then I want to go check something else out, but I don't want to lose my spot where I'm doing work. So I'll go over to that other window and go look at a report or look at a customer record or something. And then I can still come back here and keep working on my transactions. So just know that that's kind of an option you can use. We're going to talk next about sales and expenses. How do we record these in our account? Now, one process for recording that is using that bank feed, which we've talked about a little bit, but there's certain timing things, and this is getting back to this payment question about some things can come right from the bank feed and go right into QuickBooks, and you can categorize and boom, we're done. You don't really have to ever enter anything manually into QuickBooks. Other things, part of that transaction has to be entered manually in QuickBooks first, so that when it comes over to the bank feed, they can be matched. And that's the problem we're having with these payment questions you're asking. So let's walk through that. So for sales, I'm going to go under my plus sign and I'm going to create an invoice for a customer. And one thing that we're not going to talk a lot about today is the fact that every company, let's see, I don't want to really, here's all these things that are popping up and I don't want that. So here's my invoice, okay? On the invoice, there is a section of product and service. So every company has to have a product and service list if you're going to create invoices and sales receipts. And what that is it's a separate detailing of the different things that the company sells or services that it provides. Like you can see pumps, rock fountains, lighting, all of these things. And each one of these items then is tied to an income account on the chart of accounts. So that when you put in this invoice that we're selling gardening services, then that income is going to show up in my profit and loss statement. And let's use our other tab and go back to our chart of accounts. Well, actually, let's go to our inventory section and go to inventory, which is our products and services list. And if we go to gardening, there's our gardening services. If we look at that item, we can see what account it's attached to, landscaping. So it's going to show up in the landscaping income account when I make this sale. So it just gives you a way to break down your sales instead of just having one sales account on your profit and loss, which is fine. You can also know that within that, there's a bunch of different products and services that are going into that. And you could create this list and run reports by this list to see, well, how many weekly services for gardening did we charge out this last week or this last month or this last year? So if you haven't set up your products and services list, that is something to give some thought to of how you want to organize that. Think about what information you want out of QuickBooks in order to determine how you should set that up. So I'm going to go back to my other tab where I was doing the work, and I'm going to type in 4 weeks. And amount. And then I'm also going to add to this rock fountain. So you'll notice that the rate populated for this item, but not for that item. And that all has to do with how that item was set up. If you sell an item and 99% of the time it's that rate, put in that rate. If it ends up being that you sold a different fountain that was a different rate, you can change it right on the invoice. But most of the time, it's going to sell at this price. This, however, the weekly gardening services did not have a rate in the item list, so it didn't populate one, and I just added it in when I created the invoice. So think about that as you're setting those up. Does it make sense? Is every time you sell this item, it's going to be a different price, so it really doesn't make sense to put in a price that you're going to have to change anyway? Or is most of the time it's a $50 a week rate? And yeah, we have a few customers that have bigger yards or bigger gardens, so we're charging them 75 or 100. So I kind of dug into products and services there a little bit, but we need to choose a customer. Okay, so we're going to choose from our customer list. And if we want to see our actual full customer list, we can go over here to our customer hub. Just to see what's in a customer list. It shows their open balance. If you click on the drop down, you can do activities. What I want to do, I really want to just look into one of these. Maybe if I just double click. This takes me to the property or the customer record. So you can see what kind of information gets tracked in this customer record. What is... So there's transactions, there's activities, there's statements, there's recurring transactions, there's a summary about do they owe you money? Is any of it overdue? What's their address? Any notes that you have put in here, maybe from conversations you've had or projects you're working on with that customer. Here's the actual list of transactions that have happened with this customer. Let's scroll over here. A sales receipt and a deposit. So there's a lot of information in the customer record. And from that customer record, even you can go create a new transaction. So I could create an invoice right from here as well. So there's a lot of places to create an invoice. I chose to go up to this place, but if I knew the customer, I could go to the customer and create it from here. So look and see what kind of information is in that customer record and decide how you want, what kind of information you want to capture for your customers. So back to our invoice, we've chosen a customer. It's already telling us that they have a balance due of $475. That's not going to show up on their invoice, but it's information for us. Evidently, this customer does not have an email in their customer record. Otherwise, it would fill in. If there was an address in that customer record, that would fill in. When the customer was chosen, all of this information gets filled in based on what's in the customer record. So it knows that that customer has net 30 terms. Today is the date of the invoice, so 30 days. Due date is 3/5. And here's the information that we plugged into the invoice. And it is calculating some taxes. This sample company is based in California, and in California, services are not taxable, so it's marked as not taxable. That wouldn't be the case in South Dakota. That would be taxable. But that's part of your setup with that item. Is this item taxable or not? That would be a field that you would fill out when you created your items or your products and services. So it's taking that information also from the customer record. It's selecting whatever sales tax applies to that customer based on what's in their customer record. So again, if you have customers that are non-taxables, like cities and counties, you would want to make sure their customer record reflected that, so you didn't accidentally charge them sales tax. And then also you can, if you don't have a sales tax rate, it will apply the default rate for the company. So that's understanding what sales tax applies to which customers and which products and services is part of the homework you'll need to do to make sure things are set up correctly. I'm not exactly sure why it's not showing the sales tax on here. I've had that happen to me in this sample company before, so I'm not going to be too worried about it. But in theory, there should be 8% of this taxable item showing up as a sales tax. And I'm just going to say that's $17. I'm just going to use that number as an example. So what would happen when I saved this invoice? My sales account that's attached to these two items, and they might be different income accounts, would be increased by the amount of the sale. If I had sales tax applied, that would go into an account called sales tax payable, where all those sales taxes would be collected until you actually paid them to the state agency. And the invoice would be more than the sales amount. So if this was $17, that would make this $492 would be the invoice total. That $492 would go to accounts receivable because we're creating an invoice, i.e. we have not been paid, but we're recording the sale. And so then we have to record the accounts payable so that we now have a record that Dylan owes us $492. Okay, so we're going to save this invoice. So the next thing we're going to do, and I think the easiest way to get there is to close out of this. And if we go back to our customer record, let's see here. Here we have Dylan. And he has an open balance. And it says, what action should we take? We should receive a payment. So going back to the questions in the chat, we've created an invoice and that's increased our accounts receivable. Now we need to tell QuickBooks that we've actually received a payment on that invoice. So here's our customer. Here's how much they owe us. And generally down below here, so this was the invoice where it did apply sales tax after the fact, apparently. So we're going to say, okay, yep, they paid us $513. We're going to receive that $513. And what's going to happen in the back end is our accounts receivable is going to go down. And this $513 is going to go into a place called undeposited funds or payments for deposit. They use that, both of those words. So let's record and close. And so this, I think, is probably how far most of you have gotten within the QuickBooks, that you got the check, you recorded it in here, and now you took the next step and made the deposit, which I think is the right step. So one of the reasons that undeposited funds amount is used is because we don't take every single check to the bank separately. We take a group of checks to the bank to deposit them. So when we create a deposit, it is made up of all these individual items. So now if we go, before we do that, I think we're going to, well, no, let's just do this. We're going to go make a deposit now. So right over here, bank deposit. And the bank deposit is going to show us all the payments that are out there to be deposited. So if we choose this one and this one, then we know our bank deposit is this. And that's the amount that's going to come over from the bank fee. So we almost need to go through this whole process in QuickBooks of recording the payment in QuickBooks and recording the deposit as we took it to the bank, so that this deposit in QuickBooks is now going to match the deposit that comes from the bank, and the bank's going to just show it as a match, as instead of being deposited twice. I'm hoping that makes sense. If you're just receiving payment and individually making deposits every time you receive a payment, but you're not taking to the bank individually, then you're going to have a harder time matching those together. So if we do save and new, or just save and close, now we have the bank deposited saved, and then when that amount comes over from the bank feed, it'll just match it in the feed. Carmen asked if the invoice was for a membership that reoccurs. How do we do that? And maybe you saw it as we were on the invoice. There's a few menu items or options at the bottom of the invoice. And one of them is make recurring. So then when you make it recurring, I don't know if it'll let me do anything since it's not. So how often is it? Is it monthly? Is it something that you want scheduled, which means it'll automatically create it for you? Or do you just want to be reminded of it? Or just even unscheduled, that it's there to use whenever you need it. It's not like recurring on a regular basis, but it does recur. You know, how many days in advance do you want to be reminded? Do you want it to automatically send emails? So that's how it's going to, you know, when do you want it to start? When do you want it to end? You know, if it's like, okay, start today and it's a 6-month commitment. So every 6 months you want this to happen. And so you want it to end 6 months later. So there's some options there on that recurring settings. So that's the template. So in terms of credit cards or like Square, it's kind of the same function. What's coming over from the credit card might be a bunch of credit card payments connected together. Unfortunately, you don't always know which ones are connected together. So it's kind of, if you have a large volume of that, it might be kind of a struggle to say, okay, every time you got a payment in from Square, now I got to look at that and say, okay, that was these 5 customers. Now I got to go find those 5 customers and make a deposit in QuickBooks so it matches up. That can be a lot of work. What I do see sometimes people do is create like a clearing account, if you will, so that the deposits are going into that account. And then when the deposits are made, so the deposits are going into the checking account in real life. In QuickBooks, when they come into QuickBooks, they're getting recorded into this clearing account somehow. And then when you process it in QuickBooks, it comes out of the clearing account. So it should balance out to 0. But it's a little bit of an accounting hurdle, I guess. Some people just take it for what it is and, decided to do one way or the other and not do it both ways and try to match them up. That's a little bit of a challenge to figure out, but you kind of have to understand how your payment systems work. And if it's not that, you're not processing that many of them, it's probably not a big deal either. Some people even set up a separate checking account that those payments go into. So the only thing that's going in there is credit card receipts. That makes it probably a little easier then to move it out of that account into your regular checking operating account as you need to. What if you receive cash or check that doesn't require an invoice? Example, a donation. So the only time you really use an invoice is if the customer has yet to pay you. If you've already been paid or if you've already received that check, then what you want to do is create a sales receipt. No different than if I'm running a retail store and a customer comes in and buys a cup of coffee and pays in cash, I would just do a sales receipt. I might not do that in a coffee shop, a sales receipt for every sale. I might just batch cash sales together as one customer as a daily sales customer kind of thing. But essentially you're doing a sales receipt. It looks exactly like an invoice. The only difference is the amount received is not going to hit your accounts receivable account. It's going to go right to that undeposited funds account. And then you move it into your bank account when you make the deposit of that cash. Okay. So that's how we record income. Now we're going to talk about how do we record expenses. So there's a couple different paths with regard to that. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my home screen. And go to this expenses. So just like we have invoices and sales receipt on the income side, on the bill payment side or the expense side, we have checks or debit cards or credit cards that we're paying expenses with, or we have bills where we're billed by a vendor and then we pay them later. So just looking at these types of expenses that are showing up already, a credit card expense, how that's handled in QuickBooks is that it's showing the expense and the account it's going to, and then the amount is going into a credit card liability account. And then when you get your credit card bill, you go in and pay that credit card bill, and you get a listing of everything that's in that account, and you check, okay, these are all the expenses on that bill, and I'm going to write a check for it. That's the accounting way of doing it when you use credit card expenses. I've also seen companies just write a check for that credit card bill and then categorize on that check where that money's going to, rather than enter every single transaction at the time it's made. Those transactions basically get recorded when that check is written. So you write a check to Visa for $1,000 and you've got $500 for gas and $200 for supplies, and you break it out on that check. That's a probably simpler way of doing it. Now, if you have a credit card account that's attached to your QuickBooks and doing a transaction feed like the bank feed, and all those transactions are coming in individually, then you probably want to use this credit card expense function in here. But if you're just writing a check every month and you're not pulling those transactions into QuickBooks, it might be easier to do it just by when categorize expense when you pay the credit card bill. These expense items that are in here, this is the one that we looked at. Let's just look at that one again. When we matched it up through the bank feed. This is assuming the expense has been paid. It might have been paid out of the checking account. It was probably a debit account transaction. If it was a check, we probably would have used the right check function to enter it into here. But basically you're saying, who did you pay? What account did you pay them from? When did you pay them? And then what did you pay them for? So similar to an invoice, you have to identify a vendor, you have to identify dates, you have to identify what account you're paying it from, and then what it's for. And this is one of those examples of, if I was using a bank feed, I might not enter an expense this way. I might just wait till it came through the bank feed and categorize it then. But you can do it either way. You know, when it was done ahead of time, then when it came through the bank, it was just easy to match it up. And I already knew I had recorded everything the way it needed to be recorded. So you can make expenses reoccurring too, just like invoices. If you write a check, let's see if we have any of those in our. Which is getting to be less and less, but here's a check that was written. So if we looked at that one, and where it says split, that just means more than one expense account was accounted for. So this looks very much like an expense. It's just that it has a check number instead of a reference number. So it shows up in your check register a little bit differently. And it's easier to distinguish that it's actually a written check versus a debit card or something, or even a cash expense. So these item details are affecting multiple accounts. That's why it's a split. And I don't know if there's any category details here. No. So this gives you a little bit of a glimpse into what tracking inventory looks like. So there was a check written to Hicks Hardware, which is a supplier for this company, for $228.75. And what's being recorded in here is the actual physical inventory items that the store purchased to put in their inventory. They bought a fountain, they bought some sprinkler heads, pipes, and a fountain pump, which they're going to turn around and sell to their customer. So they want these items to show up in their item list as a fountain that they can actually resell. So that's why they chose the item details. If they were not tracking inventory, they could have just put cost of goods sold up here and, could have still put a description if they want, but it wouldn't be actually saying, hey, I have this fountain in my inventory to sell. It would just say, I expect to sell this to somebody, and therefore I'm going to expense it as a cost of goods sold. So again, there's ways to customize this to how you're using it for your business and how complicated and detailed you need your accounting functions to be. So basically that's the main ways to enter, expenses that are paid right away, either with a credit card or a cash expense, or a check. For products that you're going to pay for over time, that's where you have the bill and the bill payment feature. So let's take a look at those. Let's see if I pick a good one to pay. So here first is the bill to our, or from our insurance agency. So when we enter a bill, we choose the vendor, the date, when it's due, and what we were paying for, which in this case is miscellaneous. That's kind of interesting that it's not insurance, but whatever. It can be whatever category you put it to. And they didn't put a description in there, so I'd give them a check minus on that practice. But this is the expense that was recorded. Now, because we're entering this as a bill, this category of income or miscellaneous expense is going to go up by $2,000. And then our accounts payable is going to go up by $2,000 because we haven't actually paid it. So none of our cash accounts are going to get affected with this transaction. So when we save this, it's going to record the expense and record the accounts payable. And then we'll go back and we'll do the bill payment. So I noticed that it was in here. So we're just going to bring it up and look at it. So here is the bill payment, which looks like this. So we choose the payee, what account it's coming out of, and the date. And it lists underneath here all the transactions that we owe this vendor for, and we can choose which transaction we're paying. And so the check we're writing is for $2,000. So that automatically flags, okay, that's going to get applied to this $2,000 invoice because they match. If the check I was written would have been for $1,900, it would have still applied it to this $2,000 bill first because it's the oldest bill. If I would have wrote the check for $2,100, it would apply $2,000 to this and $100 to the next bill. And then it would keep track that you still needed to pay them $141.23 at some point in the future. So when the bill payment gets recorded, our accounts payable go down because we've now paid the vendor, and our checking account goes down because we are writing a check for that, or it might be an ACH, but it's coming out of the checking account. So if you enter an expense as a bill, you need to use the bill payment function to pay that bill. Don't just go write a check. Use the bill payment function to write that check. Otherwise, it's still going to show that that bill is outstanding because you didn't use the bill payment function to pay it. So you need to kind of follow that path. Similar to when you create an invoice, you need to do the receive payment function to say that invoice has been paid from your customer. Same thing with the bill. One thing to note, let's just take a look at our vendor list for a minute so you can see what that looks like. Let's see here. Go back to home. See if I click on this, do I get where I can access my customer list or not? No. We'll go here. Bills, vendors. So similar to the customer record, where it's tracking the customer contact information and what they owe us, the vendor list kind of does the same. It gives me a top level bill of what's unpaid, how many open bills there are. Here, the same open bills are also overdue, what was paid in the last 90 days. So it gives me that high level view, but then I can look here and see who I actually owe money to. And if I click on the vendor name, I can be in that vendor record and see their contact information, their transaction list of activities, any other details that are set up in their account, and any notes. And if I want to edit any of that information, I can choose to edit. If I want to create a transaction from this window for this vendor, I can use that new transaction account. Okay. I want to just quickly go over a couple other items. Because we're in a sample company, we're not going to be able to show all of these exactly step by step. But one of the things I want to really focus on or really emphasize is bank reconciliation is very important, especially when you have all these streams of information coming in. Until you reconcile your bank, you're not 100% sure everything is accounted for. Or maybe that you wrote a check that hasn't cleared the bank yet. Why is that? You don't know that until you reconcile. And I'm trying to think where that lives. I know I saw it over here. Oh, shoot. All these windows keep popping up and getting in my way. Usually, I don't want to try the banking. It's usually right in here to reconcile, but maybe I have to go to the bank register. There we go. So the bank register, for those of us that still write checks, this might look a little familiar. Here's where you reconcile. And again, it's just to match everything. And here's a little tutorial on that. We're just going to get started and not go through that, but I'll point out so this is an AI powered experience. I'm not going to go through that one, but here's what the traditional experience looks like. What account are you reconciling? You've got the statement from the bank in your hand or in your inbox, whatever. What's the balance ending on the statement, and what's the date of the statement? And I'm just going to put some numbers in here to start reconciling. And then what it's going to pull up is all the transactions in that account. And it may even mark some of these as cleared for you. But the goal is to get this difference to zero by clearing and marking everything that's in QuickBooks with everything that's on the bank statement. So if this 300 shows up on the bank statement, you clear it, and you clear it, and you clear it. And if something doesn't show up on the bank statement, you don't clear it. You just clear those that have cleared, basically. If there's something on the bank account that's not in this window, that means there's something missing that you haven't put into your QuickBooks. But once you get everything checked off and you've got everything that's on the statement checked off in here, then your difference should be zero and you should be able to reconcile. And you should be able to do that consistently, month in and month out. And when you can't reconcile, there's a good reason for it. Something's missing. Something that was recorded in QuickBooks was recorded for a different amount than it cleared the bank. Even if it's like 57 cents instead of 55, you can figure that out and you can fix it. So if you force a reconciliation with a difference, it's going to show up as an expense in your profit and loss. And you're going to have on your statements when you go to do your account, tax account stuff for taxes, it's going to say reconciliation discrepancy of $3,567. And your tax accountant's going to look at you like, what the heck is that? So just reconcile. It's the best. That's really the only way that you know everything's in there correctly. So I'll jump off my soapbox here. I'm not going to go over sales tax in this function, but as I mentioned on an invoice, sales taxes are put into sales tax payable. So when it's time to pay the sales tax, it should know what your, there it is. What sales tax has been collected based on what you have on your receipts. And based on what monies you've been paid. And that should match with what you need to pay. And fortunately for us in South Dakota, we only have one taxing agency that we're paying. So it's a little bit simpler than this. But if you choose an agency, it should know what's to be paid. So hopefully those match up for you. And the process in QuickBooks is pretty simple. If anyone does have questions on that, when they go back to work in their QuickBooks, feel free to give me a holler. The last thing I want to mention, as we are getting close to the top of the hour here, is reports. So QuickBooks has a number of reports built right within their system. I don't know if they're up to quite 100 yet, but they're getting closer. And they're categorized by what types of reports. Your financial reports are your balance sheet, your profit and loss. Another one is accounts receivable. So these are favorited. So you can favorite the reports that you use on a regular basis, and they'll show up here. So you don't have to dig through the 100 reports to find what you want every time. But I would just kind of look through those reports and see what they look like. And if you hover over this, I think, I don't know what that means. Launches in modern view. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Again, another different view. Maybe it's just telling me that. Let's see if we can. Click on the list on the report, and it's going to show you what it looks like. And this is a very short date range. So if we go to, say, last year, a lot of times you can just pick the reporting period. You don't have to change the specific dates. So that is helpful. So now we've got every invoice from last year. And we can sort it by name if we want to. So we have all those together. We can also do reports by customers, sales by customers, so that sorts it already by customer. You can sort by due date, amount, all of these different categories. You can customize reports to say, hey, I only want to see transaction types, or not I want to see invoices, because that's what we're looking at, obviously. But let's say I only want to see invoices by amount that are greater than $1,000. And now if I filter that, it just shows me one or 2,000. So when you customize, you can filter and just show the things you want to see. You can show different fields also. So it's more not necessarily a customization. It's more this columns. Like I want to show these columns and I don't want to show those columns. So there's things you can change formatting You can change the name, how you title those reports. You can change the date range. If you customize a report that you want to see every month, you can save that as a customized report. So then when you go back to your reports list, there is going to be, should be a customized report list that you can access. Might not be right from this screen. I might have to go back to reports, custom reports. This is my standard reports list I'm looking at. Let's look at a balance sheet and a profit and loss here quick. So profit and loss, this is for the first month plus a few days of 2026. I want to point this out for a couple reasons. Oh, let's see. I'm gonna have to expand the state range, I think. I wanted to show you what the sub-accounts look like. So here's job materials, which is a sub-account of landscaping. So then it subtotals job materials, it subtotals labor, and then landscaping is this number, plus whatever is directly in the landscaping. It's kind of hard to read in this format, and when you print it out, it's not always a lot better. So you have to kind of recognize what these bolded numbers, you don't count this, this, and this, and this. This is a subtotal of these three bolded numbers. So it's a little bit hard to read sometimes, the way they have it laid out. It was much better in the desktop version. So hopefully they're getting there. And then if you wanted to collapse it, you could do that for the whole report. Right here, I think. Collapse. So now we don't show any subtotals at all, but we probably want to expand out our expenses. We don't want that. But here, you can see this has sub-accounts underneath of it. So if I want to, which is the one we deleted or made inactive, I can also selectively collapse and expand items. So I want this one and I want that one to be expanded, but I don't want the others to be expanded. And the ones that aren't bolded aren't, they're the main accounts. Also on the reports, it'll say what basis the report is, when it was printed. You can have that printed on your reports or not if you choose to take it off. So an income statement shows sales that were made in an accrual basis. It's showing all sales that were recorded, whether or not they were paid. Okay, so this shows an invoice that we haven't been paid for yet. It's still income. It shows an expense that we haven't actually paid the vendor for yet, but we've created the bill in QuickBooks. So the expense is there and dated in this range. So, and then the net income is just the difference between the income and expenses. It's not necessarily cash in the bank. If you want to know cash in the bank, then you got to go look at that balance sheet and see what that looks like. Especially in an accrual basis, what's there is sales. Again, not all of that's been collected, so that cash is not there. You could show a profit, but you could have gone backwards in your checking account for the month because you made a lot of sales, but you haven't been paid for them yet. So our balance sheet shows our assets, bank accounts, accounts receivable, inventory, fixed assets, and then who we owe money to. So assets are what we own, liabilities are what we owe, and equity is the difference. Can you maintain a balance sheet on QuickBooks? Yes. So keeping track of the equipment values versus the debt on the equipment. So yes, you can keep a balance sheet like we're showing here, but you don't want to be selective. You don't want to just keep track of your equipment and what you owe against equipment. You want to keep track of all your assets. Otherwise, the balance sheet is not worth a whole lot. You might as well just keep that on a spreadsheet, because the balance sheet's going to get generated in QuickBooks based on the information you put in QuickBooks, whether it's correct or not. So if you have a company existing and then you start using QuickBooks and you don't create that beginning balance sheet to say what I had on hand when I came into QuickBooks, it's just going to create the balance sheet based off all your transactions in QuickBooks to date. So that won't be a full picture because you might have brought in $5,000 in your bank account and $10,000 with equipment and a $5,000 loan. But if you didn't put that stuff in QuickBooks, it's not going to reflect correctly. So that is one of the challenges when you first start up, is getting that beginning balance sheet right. When reconciling and matching the transaction from bank transaction tab, and there is no transaction in QuickBooks, how to create the point of sale credit card or actual ledger in QuickBooks. Well, if there's no transaction in QuickBooks, then you're not going to have a match for that transaction. So you're just going to record the transaction through the bank feed. But if you are reconciling it and there is no transaction in QuickBooks, you just need to go back into QuickBooks and create the transaction. And if it's a point of sale or a credit card, you have to decide how you want to enter that in. If you're a retail store and you have a point of sale system and you're recording all your sales in that, how are you getting that data into QuickBooks? Some people do it like a daily sales sheet where they'll record sales for the day. Some people will connect their point of sale system to their QuickBooks so that information's coming over and getting tagged into the right income accounts. So you just kind of have to decide how you want that information to come over. Is there a way to reset the balance sheet without messing everything up? Yes, there is. It probably would be best to go back to the start and create what you didn't bring in to begin with. It might, if you're going to adjust your balance sheet, the best way to do it is either get that beginning balance sheet in there correctly so that hopefully that fixes everything. But if there's some major fixes, I would wait and do that at the end of a fiscal year. Don't do it in the middle of a fiscal year. And probably you'll want to work with your accountant on that to make sure you get it recorded. So one question, positions have changed and QuickBooks won't let a new user sign in. An invoice was sent, but it won't recognize me. One thing I would check in there is to say, that person may have left, but is their user account still active in QuickBooks? And so that might be why it's not recognizing you. It also might be recognizing you because if it is still active in QuickBooks, maybe maybe you only have one user allowed, or maybe you already have 3 and your account only allows you for 3. So you have to see how many accounts are allowed, how many users are allowed. Other than that, I don't know what would be causing the hang up there, but those would be a couple things to check into. Really thank everybody for coming. I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel here quick to take us home. And if there's anyone who has some additional questions, I'm able to stay on and ask those after the fact. So Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, just wanted again, thank everybody for coming, but stay tuned for future trainings between the SBDC and Grow. We do lots of different technical assistance trainings. You can find those on our Facebook page, either the Grow Facebook page or the Small Business Development Center page as well. If you aren't part of our newsletter, let us know and we can get you on our list to send for future trainings as well. We will be sending a recording of today's training and a follow-up survey too. So keep an eye out for that. And again, thank you to all of our partners and joining us. If you need anything, here's our contact information. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Reach out if we can be of assistance with this or any other thing along your business growth journey, our business startup journey. That's what we're here for. Our services are free of charge. So a great place to start if we can help you.